So we talked about power and energy, right? And we said energy is the integration of power over time. And then we learned that power consumption of a circuit is proportional to the squared of V, or the voltage that is being supplied, and then linearly it changes with frequency. But what complicated this was that frequency was also controlling the maximum frequency. The voltage could control the maximum frequency that you could have, right? So we had to be mindful of that as well. Now we are thinking, okay, so we have to have strategies to optimize the power, to reduce the power as much as we can at different places. Okay, so the first one that we talked about was dynamic frequency scaling, which was basically, if you don't need a fast frequency, then you can reduce the power by using the lower frequency. More complicated one and a better one was reducing both voltage and frequency if you don't need it. Last one was power gating or sleep modes. Okay, the one that is going to save you most time, but it's the most complex, because now you have to consider wake up and have firmware to wake up your system again, and then spend some time on it. Okay, perfect. So since we talked about the sleep modes, there are actually 4 or 5 different states that the sleep can happen, right? You can have no sleeping, active, everything is running, and then light, which is the wake-up time is going to be short, and not everything is going to be working. For example, here, if we can say in the runtime, when it's run, it's normal operation. So this is normal operation, that is our reference. Then for sleep mode, where, you don't have it here, sorry. So yes, the sleep mode is that you're going to reduce some of the functionalities, and then that way you're going to reduce the power consumption, but at the same time it will increase the wake-up time. This trade-off is what introduced us to this, basically, to understanding the different power consumption and different wake-up time that you would require in different sleep modes. For example, in STM32 that we have, the stop mode has 157 power consumption, less than the running. Standby is standby is 2000, and then standby versus a stop, then you can see the different basically ratios that you would get. When you're running, CPU is running, flash is running, SRAM, peripherals, RTC, the current that you would need is 44 milliamp, and the wake up is 0. Everything is running, nothing is going to sleep. Next stage that you can have is the sleeping. And the only thing that is sleeping here is the CPU. So CPU is not going to run, but peripherals, flash, SRAM, RTC is running. And this way, we reduce the current consumption to about 2/3, 30 milliamp. Now, you have to wake the CPU up when you need it, right? The example we used was what? Do you remember what was the example?
Bluetooth light sleep mode, I think was.
Yes, exactly, BLE, right? When you would just wake the CPU up when you needed it to send signal. But in this mode, still the power consumption is high. As we said, it's about 66%, let's say, of the running state, but the wake-up time is less than 10 cycles. Then you go through stop and standby. You would see that you keep losing more and more functionalities. For example, in a stop, you already lost peripherals. In a standby, you're losing everything except RTC. RTC is always running because it's running on a battery, and to keep the real-time clock going, basically. But it has the minimum power consumption and the maximum wake-up time. Okay, 375 microsecond. So just to review, so far we talked about clock gating and power gating, right? Clock gating is that we are stopping the clock signal to the parts of the circuit that they don't need it. Dynamic power is eliminated, but the static power is still going because power supply is still connected. Then the state is preserved, meaning that you still have power for the RAM, the flash, and SRAM to keep working, right? So the state is saved. Then the wake-up time is very fast. When you're doing clock time, you just switch an enable signal, and then you're ANDing it. Remember how we clock gated? We were ANDing the clock. We were with an enable signal, and then feeding that to our sequential logic. But in power gating, we are removing the power supply. We are cutting things from the source. So no static power, no dynamic power, right? Nothing. But the state is going to be lost unless you save it on a non-volatile memory, right? And then the wake-up time is slower, it can go to milliseconds. So the analogy is that you can say clock gating is like a light nap, and then power gating is like a deep sleep. So this is kind of difference between them. Clock gating is usually used when you have states that are like microsecond, millisecond idles, and then power gating is mostly for millisecond to even seconds, right? If you have seconds of idle states in your system, it just makes sense to use the power gating. When you put all of these together, as we said, there is, by the way, when I use black or dark background, is it better or worse? Is it this? Huh?
More power efficient.
No, visually.
About the same.
The same? Okay. Okay, that's good to know that I changed all of them for no reason. But, okay. Now we talked about the trade-off between the wake-up time and the power you're saving, right? There is a point, there is a basically break-even point that you have to pass that time. The power you're saving should be worth the time that you're going to spend to wake up the system. Otherwise, you added all of this overhead for no reason. The design rule is that if your idle state is about 10 times the wake-up time, then do the power gating, okay? Not below that. It's not worth it. Like, for example, if the wake-up time is, let's go back to this. Here, the wake-up time is, let's say, 110 microsecond, right? And you need to, your system, let's say, is going to be idle for every 200 millisecond. Every 200 microsecond, it has to wake up to send the data. Then just don't do it. It's not worth it, right? So, for example, for STM32, the sleep must be more than 200 microsecond here to break even, right? This is the break even point. And then, but ideally you want it to be more to make this a better deal for yourself. What else I can say here? That's it. Now the next topic, let's quickly go through this one too, is that the battery that we are supplying to our circuit is usually like, as the battery, as the capacity, as the voltage drops, right? the voltage is dropping, the voltage is varying that is being supplied to the MCU, right? But the MCU says Vref must be 5 volt or 3.3 volt, right? So it needs a stable voltage. What should you do to keep it stable, right? So for that, either you have a power supply or you have a battery that is draining over time. Whatever is happening with your power supply, you can't have that exactly translated to the MCU. MCU needs a stable voltage. How do we do that? How do we achieve that? We do that by voltage regulators. The job of a voltage regulator is to provide a constant voltage to whatever it's serving, right? And we have 2 types of voltage regulators. Some of them are the low dropout regulator, which are the linear ones, basically. They're very simple. Usually you have, if you've taken a hardware course, you have a bunch of LEDs that is cutting, and then you have an RC circuit that is basically removing the ripples and all of that. And then, but it has limited capacity in how much it can keep it while the voltage is dropping. If the voltage is dropping too much, then it might not be able to keep it as a stable. But within an acceptable rate, it would work perfectly fine. Then we have switched mode power supply. These ones are more complicated, but and they have higher efficiency. But basically, they are converting by something similar to PWM, basically. They're turning it on and off to change the average voltage, right? So it's very similar to what they're doing, how you did actually dim, how you dimmed an LED using PWM. You're basically doing that with this circuit for power. The voltage. You're changing the average voltage by switching. So for example, we have the circuit of the linear voltage regulator, which you would usually see like these. Those ones with through holes. Those ones are more basic, but you might see the SMD versions where the legs are going on the PCB more in the compact design. And then you can see it's an op amp, quite easy, like you have an op amp and then another transistor. As I said, you can even do this with diodes as well. Whereas in a switch mode power supply, you can see how the circuit looks, right? You have to have filter, rectifier, and all these different parts. But if you go on Amazon and say, I want a 12-volt power supply, I don't know if you've ever tried to get one of those. It's basically, it looks like these. It looks like your laptop charger, actually, with a knob on the on it to actually change the voltage from 1 volt to 12 volt. Okay, by changing that knob, you're changing the voltage, and it's providing a constant voltage for you. Those ones are using this one, actually. Those are not linear regulators because they get a 60 hertz power from the power supply, which is 110 volt in Canada. So it's a 110 volt, 60 hertz coming in sinusoidal, and then goes through the rectifier and PFC and all of those things, and then provides whatever voltage that you want. Okay? Just be careful that they regulate voltage, they don't regulate current. So if you draw, it's going to draw it from the wall. And then it happened to one of my friends that, the fuse went off in their apartment. But yeah, so be careful with that. And so if you want a power supply at home, that's a good option, but you have to be careful about the current consumption yourself. Okay, so now, power optimization. What are the practical guidelines? Okay. So we profile first, then optimize. Why do we profile first? Because it has to be worth it. right? We have to know how long we are going to be measuring, be computing, and then spending time on post-processing, for example, right? At every stage, actually, if I'm doing the industry talk, you will see that in a system we had 3 different states. Each of them, different sensors, are in different states, and they're consuming different powers. So you have to know that before you're designing your sleep modes, right? So we measure actual power through that to see how long each battery would going to last us. Then we are maximizing the sleep time by, event-driven architecture. We use interrupts, not polling. Whenever we can, we do batch operations to minimize wake events. So we do things that are coming back to back in one batch, right? And then if we need, we sleep and then come back to the next series of tasks. Then we are minimizing active power. For example, we said we can run us at a slower frequency, if possible, at a lower voltage, right? And then we use DMA, for example, to offload CPU, because we know CPU is very costly in power, right? The first step we could have done, 30% of power saving comes from putting CPU into sleep, just the CPU. And then if we turn off the unused peripherals, if you remember, that one was the second sleep modes, we would go from 30 milliamp to microamp range, okay? So then we can use voltage regulators to make sure that we are supplying a good voltage, so system is not dropping, is not losing power supply and operation. And then, yeah, that's basically it. Power optimization pitfalls: ignoring wake up overhead. Okay, we already talked about this. If the sleep is, or the idle is too short, don't use the sleep mode. Forgetting peripheral powers. If you're connecting something that is going to take power from your circuit, is being powered up by your circuit, then that means you need to supply power to it, okay? And then the rest of it you can read here. Any questions? No? Okay, I'll post the annotated notes for this. So, and then, yeah, possibly if the calculations are wrong, you can check it from the annotated ones, okay? Thank you very much, everyone.